Let's
Let's go
go.
live with Jack Kelly. Hey, there's Joe Lalgee. Hey, Joel, welcome to the show, man. It's great to meet you. I've seen all your videos. They're amazing.
All of them. You've seen all 2,000 of them.
No, I'm lying. I really just saw a few. But thanks for calling me out on it. So I see. All right, I've seen a few of the. I've seen it. No, I'm definitely for doing my homework. I did. I took we looked at a lot of the videos,
Love it.
and I really am interested in speaking to you because you speak with so many different recruiters.
Yeah.
You engage with hundreds of candidates every day. It seems getting the emails, getting notifications from them, and interacting. So I figure you have a great pulse of what's going on. And what
Yeah.
I'm seeing from my perspective, Joel, is that particularly for white collar, mid to senior level professionals, and this is kind of LinkedIn and Twitter, the kind of folks who are these are the audience. They're
Yeah.
having a hard time, a really hard time. So one of the things I'm trying to do with these LinkedIn lives is to have people like yourself to give value and to give advice and guidance, along with talking about your career journey, but to share. So, because people need it, man. It's a lot of people are hurting. And the thing is, they don't talk about it, but they'll talk to privately about it. And so I figure you could give a lot of value. But to start with, you began as a recruiter, right?
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. I was born a recruiter. No, I wasn't born, but I started in the recruitment industry 2015.
Right.
A friend of mine, he worked for Randstad for a really, really long time, was
Yeah.
one of the top producers in the Midwest, and he spun off and started an agency. It was kind of I think one of the first RPO, like hourly business models where
Mhm.
essentially we'd work on positions on an hourly basis. So it was kind of a unique billing model to get into on the agency side. And he said, at the time I was working in the banking industry, was not for me. And he said, look, you can work remotely. This is 2015. He said, you can work remotely. We'll teach you everything you need to know about our process, about how we recruit. You'll get to work with some great partners. And I said, you had me at remote because at the time, the banking
Yeah.
industry, rough. I was working like 12, 13-hour days. And yeah, I just jumped in, and right from the get-go, I was meeting with clients, um, strategizing with them, figuring out like how do we fill these tough roles. And I think for me, it was a great time to get into recruiting, right? Because from like 2015 to till COVID, everything was pretty much just straight
Mhm.
line, steady growth. And then I worked on a variety of different industries. So everything from engineering, pretty much everything except for tech. I mean, I did
Mhm.
engineering, healthcare, construction, everything from garbage truck drivers and using Craigslist to get people to call you back to CFO, CMO roles. So yeah, really enjoyed recruiting, and I've been in the industry ever since.
I always find that wild when people say like you do, hey, I recruit for this and that and the other sector. I've always focused just like on one or two
Yeah.
sectors. So I kind of know it. I know it really well and feel comfortable in that area. But I guess there's a different way you like doing business. So I guess you liked kind of learning and just pivoting to different areas, right?
Well, I ended up niching in construction. So
Yeah.
for about 3 years, I spent time just, working with general contractors, not the big players, but like the middle of the
Hmm.
road players. So anyway, some of these companies were anywhere from 200 million to a billion a year in revenue. So kind of mid-size that maybe have a couple of office locations in a couple of areas, and working with them on project manager roles, superintendent roles, some of those leadership roles. So and that was about 3 years into my career. So I started off as a generalist, which I
Hmm.
thought was helpful just to get a feel for
Yeah.
like what are the types of conversations I like. And I always tell people when they're trying to get into recruitment, um, it matters that you enjoy or you like are excited about the people and the roles that you're looking to fill. Otherwise, I just think it's hard to have like an engaging conversation. So if you're like, hey, I love tech, and
Hmm.
I'm really passionate about the industry, great. Tech recruiting is great. If you're like, yeah, I don't really care about new technology, it's kind of just not interesting. And I'm like, all right, well, even if it makes better money, if you're not going to be engaged with it, it's hard to really think that you're going to be able to last decades in it. And I think with construction, what I loved about construction was, when you talk to people who are actually building the skylines of
Hmm.
cities, I just love that, and so it worked out really, really well. And I think I'm looking at getting back, or started to get back into recruiting here in the last month or so, and I'm kind of taking that same approach, like more of a generalist, for probably the first 3 to 6 months. But it wouldn't surprise me if I went back into construction recruitment again, because I just enjoyed it so much.
It's so interesting because there are different schools of thought. Like for me, I'm not. I've run a search firm now. It's 26 years, right? And do I love the area I'm in? No, you know. But here's what the thing is. What ends up happening, how you say pursue your passion?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times you pursue your passion, right? Like every graduation speech, pursue your passion. And meanwhile, most people's passion are like really dumb. And it's going to be like basket weaving or whatever. That's not going to make any money. So what good is that? But I find what happens is that if you're good at what you do, so let's say you're good with construction and you like dealing with these construction, folks, and then you're making a lot of placements and then you're making a lot of money, then all of a sudden you're passionate about it because you're like, this is great. I love this space. I love construction because I'm killing it. I'm making a lot of money. I'm placing people. So I just bring it up because oftentimes it's just the opposite. And then people feel like, oh man, I made a big career mistake because I'm following my passion, but it's really following what you could do to make money. And then that passion comes with it. And then with the
Yeah.
passion, you just make more money and do well.
Yeah, and look, I always, if you follow any of my content, I like to keep it real with the talk as
Mhm.
well. And I think when it comes to work, I mean, you got to be realistic, right? Like you're not gonna love every single day and every single thing that you're
Mhm.
doing. I mean, I think sometimes that's what people can think, like particularly people who I deal a lot on TikTok, right? I do these TikTok lives, and I'm constantly running into people who are unsatisfied, they're not happy in their roles, they're not happy with things, and they're searching almost for this answer of like, I want to find a job that fits all of these boxes. And it doesn't matter if it's fully remote and you're earning a ton of money, and you're working for a cool company. There's just going to be days where it's not great, right? And at the end of the day, I would much rather be hanging out with my family on vacation
Mhm.
and doing the things that I love, or like watching soccer because I'm a big soccer fan, than working. So I just want to keep that in reason too. Like I don't want to paint like this like unrealistic expectation of what I do. But within that, I found creating content, that is
Yeah.
almost a passion that's come about while recruiting as well. And it's taken a while to kind of put the two together. But I'm now in a spot where I'm actually able to do some things that I
Yeah.
really, really enjoy on the creative side with content, and mix them in with, maybe some of the more, I guess, like the procedures when it comes to recruiting that sometimes for me can be a little bit boring, if that makes sense.
It makes a lot of sense because I find out sometimes it's good to have let's say your core thing, right? That's when you're recruiting, right? And you love it and you do it. But then sometimes you need something else
Yeah,
to keep it interesting because we're not one dimensional. You have other skills, other interests. So then you're able to do your creative outlook
exactly.
with the marketing and all the videos. So this way you feel a little bit more fulfilled. So the days like maybe it's not going well with recruiting, you're killing it on TikTok or vice
Exactly.
versa. So you have a lot going on. But you know what? I like to just go to a point you talked about, like on TikTok, because you see that so many people are unhappy there, right? Quiet quitting, bare minimum Monday, acting your wage. I don't know about you. I've never seen people so miserable and unhappy at work than the last few years. Are you seeing that a lot? Are you noticing that just more than ever, really just
Yeah.
unhappy and angry?
I think one of the underlying things I actually
Yeah.
think that I've noticed as well, and this is, I interact outside of work. I'm involved in different communities, and one of the things that I see, particularly from I don't want to necessarily label it as every single person in this demographic, but I'm just going to say like Gen Z and kind of
Mhm.
like younger people are coming through. It's almost like a lack of sense of like direction when it even comes to career, because I think it's really confusing nowadays on like
Yeah.
what a good career path looks like, or how what a career path is supposed to be. And so I think things were just more clear almost, before social media, when technology was a little bit more simple. And now it's like I feel like there's almost a lack of like direction and like which should I do? And there's so many different options. Um, and obviously a lot of people, for example, just default to, yeah, I just want to get into tech, like as if like just getting into tech
Mhm.
is going to be this magic fix. And so I think that's going on. And then you also have, I think what people get, sometimes they get these dream jobs or they get these positions, and then they just realize like it wasn't even what they thought it was going to
Mhm.
be. And so I think there's disillusionment around that. Also think with layoffs and just how much negative news we have had
Yeah.
really since last July, July 2022. I guess that isn't last July, but July 2022, when things started to really go in a negative direction. I haven't talked to a lot of people recently that are just genuinely optimistic
Mm.
about the future. I think there's a lot of people who want to hope and they have hope for the future, mainly recruiters, because I think that's how we're wired. But it's just such a stark contrast to 2021 as well. So I think you got to keep that in mind, and it's been a long 18 months for people. And I think trust, loyalty, all of these things, um, are just out. It's just completely changed, right? And I
Yeah.
think even priorities, because of when I look at COVID and what happened with the pandemic, a lot of priorities shifted in people's lives as well. And now we're seeing that bleed into the workforce. So I think if you're a leader at a company, I think it is a massive challenge nowadays to keep people engaged and satisfied even in their work. And obviously, if you're pushing people back to the office, if you follow my content, I think you're going to really, really struggle. And the challenge is going to be creating environments that people just want to be in nowadays.
So you have kind of the pulse on recruiters. How many recruiters do you think you've been speaking to over the last year or so?
It's
Hundreds,
got,
probably, right?
yeah, I mean, it's got to be between 500 and 1,000 at least. I mean, it's 3, 4 meetings a day.
So with all these recruiters, I don't want to generalize, but like, what's the vibe? Are they worried? Are they losing their jobs? Are they
Yeah.
fearing losing their jobs? Scared of AI? Want to embrace the AI? What's kind of the vibe check?
I think I think there's lots of different vibe checks. Like
Hmm.
I speak to some recruiters that are really embracing like entrepreneurism, and
Hmm.
they're excited to start their business, and they're really taking on these AI tools and researching and really trying to upskill, and they're excited about what AI is going to bring. And then there's definitely another camp which, there are a lot of recruiters right now who have gone through a beating, maybe multiple layoffs in the
Yeah.
last 18 months or the last 3 years, multiple layoffs. Um, also, so I think it goes both ways, but I'd say it leans more towards, um, yeah, I'm not really sure what I'm supposed to do, or I don't know, maybe I need to get out of recruiting even.
Yeah.
A lot more of those conversations, which again, I think it's recruiters, particularly on the agency side, it's you always are going to want to be optimistic because it's a mindset thing, right? Like if you're not just going to sit around and go, well, there's no jobs in my
Hmm.
niche or my sector, I'm done. You're like, it doesn't matter, I'm going to make it work, I'm going to find those open jobs. But I think it's just worn on people the last at least 12 months, right? Or
Hmm.
12 to 18 months. So um I would say most recruiters I talk to are more in like what you're describing, but there are some recruiters that I think that are really thriving in this type of environment, and they're embracing new technology, and they're uh starting their own agency, or they're coming up with different ways to help clients and getting creative with things. So I think those recruiters, probably in that 10 to 20%, at least from conversations I've had.
And we say embracing new technologies. It's AI. Are there other things that they're saying, hey, maybe I'm going to try this software or this platform to really maybe just jumpstart my recruiting business?
I've seen a lot of people just getting creative with billing models and like
Hmm.
the way that they're serving clients. So for example, I think a lot of recruiters they have this mindset like if they start their own agency, they've got to be 25% contingency or
Hmm.
they've got to be retained. And I think more and more people are realizing like there's actually no rules. Like you could start up an agency and you could run like an an hourly model. You could run some sort of monthly retainer where you're like helping clients for a certain amount of hours to and working on a certain amount of roles. I think there's employer branding services and like personal branding services and social media services that you can provide. So I think more recruiters are realizing like, hey, I maybe have to get creative because maybe the traditional money isn't there or people aren't as interested in especially, and this is more so like I think if you're like yourself, you've been doing what you've been doing long enough to where you have a lot of relationships. I don't see you needing necessarily have to, having to do that. But if you just started and you don't have any credibility or you don't have any brand recognition, sometimes you have to be
Yeah.
a little bit more flexible. And when you start up your own business, especially if you're just a one person operation, you can leverage some of that flexibility with pricing in a way that you're helping people and you can get creative with it and it can work and you can create a nice little what they call like a lifestyle business almost.
So what do you think about some of these AI platforms? Do you think long term it's going to help recruiters, or it could be a challenge where companies will say, hey, why do we need Jack or why do we need Joel when we could just kind of, you know, get a subscription to ABC AI recruiting platform and we'll just do it ourselves? What do you see?
I think when it comes to just wide adoption of
Hmm.
AI, I think it's more challenging even than people think. Like it's like Chat GPT is such a great example. And I just read on LinkedIn, it just
Hmm.
said it just saw was it 100 million users. That was the headline. 100 million users weekly using it.
Hmm.
But I think that there's when it comes to recruitment, like there's a lot of issues. Like I take sourcing for example. Like what is the sourcing technology? Okay, it's matching up keywords on a resume or LinkedIn profile or some sort of social profile, which is generated by that user. So it's user generated content. There's no validation there at all. Okay, LinkedIn skills are picked by the LinkedIn profile creator. No validation there. You're matching that with a job description, which anyone who's worked in recruitment knows that job descriptions are usually just
Hmm.
copy and pasted. They don't really even talk about the job. There's just a list of requirements of people. And so the matching those things up, and I think we all like anyone who's been in recruitment just knows like I've talked to some great resumes that have ended up not being that great. I've also talked to some of the worst like construction was a great example. I used to see some of the worst resumes, and then you talk to the candidate and they're amazing and they've done actually great work. They just didn't care about their
Hmm.
resume because they weren't looking for a new job. So I think you've got to keep that in mind. And then I think we there's so much data out there. I don't know how hard it is really to find, contact information anyway. I mean, there's a lot of free sites that offer
Hmm.
that. Uh, but then there's a whole new skill that needs to happen, and that's getting people's attention. And it's the more these tools are available and the more people adopt them, the noisier it gets in all of our inboxes, the noisier it gets on social media, because it gets easier and easier to create content, easier and easier to message, easier and easier to source people. Now this is when I think the new skill in recruitment emerges, where how smart are you at being able to look at a profile and almost guess what their motivation could
Hmm.
be for looking for a new job, like how and so I think there's going to be an emergence of different recruitment skills. I think it's going to require more creativity, and so I think recruiters that are able to really really look past a resume and look past you know almost like look past even the job description and understand, okay, who is this hiring manager, what are their motivations, who's this candidate, what are their
Hmm.
motivations. I think that skill becomes more valuable, and that's really the human side of recruiting, right? So I think we'll start to see a shift back to the need for that because there's just, if everybody's sending email sequences, that means it's going to get harder for your email sequences and your emails to stand out. And so you have to get more creative with how you reach out to people.
And being creative, that leads us to like what I think most people know you for. You've really jumped in and got very involved with social media, TikTok, Twitter, LinkedIn.
Yeah.
So what made you decide to do that pivot and say, hey, I'm going to be that guy who's going to really, kind of give a visual element to it and draw people in? And are you still sharing and working with clients, recruiters, and job seekers, like how to brand themselves, how to
Yeah.
maybe do videos with themselves? Maybe you could kind of share what you do and some of like the success stories.
Yeah. Yeah. Look, so 2019, September 2019, I just got into a point. I've been in recruitment for about 4 or 5 years,
Right.
and yeah, I enjoy recruiting, right? It's just something fun about talking with people and talking with clients and working with them. Um, but I started seeing on LinkedIn, on my kind of downtime, because I was off
Mm-hmm.
social media completely. It actually canceled my Instagram, my Facebook. I wasn't on anything but LinkedIn. And so I'd be on LinkedIn Recruiter, and then occasionally I go to LinkedIn, the social media site, and I started just seeing videos. And there's a guy local to me who's in Milwaukee,
Mm-hmm.
um, called Q, or Quentin Allums, if you guys know him. He did a lot of video when video first got introduced on LinkedIn, and a lot of his content was like, if you create content, if you can get people to know who you are, you can get them to reach out to you,
Mm-hmm.
essentially. Like, or if you produce content, you can create a magnet. And I start thinking, the amount of times I just reach out to people cold and they don't know who I am, and that's a part of the job I like the least, because it's just
Mm-hmm.
full of rejection. I was like, it'd be amazing if I could create video
Yeah.
and content and people could know who I am and they'd reach out to me. Like, that would be amazing. Who wouldn't want that?
Mm-hmm.
And so, and then I looked at LinkedIn content and I was like, this doesn't really look like that hard to do. And call me naive or whatever. I was like, you know what? I think I can write as good as what I'm seeing out there. I think I could do as good a video as what I'm seeing out there. And so I just started creating video and started writing and creating videos. And really, really quickly, I just realized, like, number one, I really enjoy it. And then number two, I have plenty of ideas and plenty of things that I can talk about and share. So I was like, okay, this works out well. And I remember somebody else at my agency at the time, they started doing
This
the
is
same
Hirewell,
thing.
right?
No,
Or
this is the first agency I was with, they're called
okay.
Titus Talent,
Gotcha.
up in Milwaukee. And so one of the guys I worked with was like, he started doing the same thing, and then he got like a week in, he's like, I don't have anything else to say. He's like, how do you come up with stuff? And I was like,
Yeah.
I don't know, man. You
Yeah.
just come up with stuff. So yeah, so really since that point, since 2019, it became probably like more excited and passionate about creating content than recruiting. But then I realized, like, you know what, I can kind of blend the two together. And so I started generating inbound leads, for recruitment with content. And I
Mm-hmm.
was like, oh wow, this actually does work. It took a little bit of time, and I figured out, I made lots of mistakes and figured out what works, what doesn't work. Um, and then fast forward to
Wait, can I
kind of the
just say,
last,
can
yeah,
I,
yeah, yeah.
I don't mean so let's say you have a content. This would go out to maybe a potential hiring manager that you design the content to say, whatever the content may be, to get their attention, to say, hey, I like this guy, Joel. This is pretty creative. Let's give him a shot. Is that kind of how it works, or to
I,
start
I
with?
think I think like the way that it starts out
Mm-hmm.
first is, when you are connected with people on LinkedIn,
Mm-hmm.
usually you connected with three people, right? Candidates and prospects you're wanting to work with, candidates you placed, and then clients you're working with. So your LinkedIn connections are usually people you've had some interaction with for the most part. So when you first start, you're kind of talking to people
Mm-hmm.
which I think can feel weird to people. But then as you start extending out your network and people start seeing you, it really impacts you outbound first. So when you reach out to people, a common thing they'll say is, oh, I've seen some of your content. So you just have that familiarity there. So it takes away that kind of pure cold call feel. And then I think once you've been creating content probably for 3 to 6 months, could be longer now because I think it's noisier. But once it's been for a consistent amount of time, that is when people will start reaching out to you, as long as you have a good balance in your content. Like you want to have some personal content where you're talking about yourself because people want to work with people they like. You also want to put out content that shows you're a subject matter expert in whatever niche you're actually recruiting in. And then you want to talk about your jobs and your accomplishments and the actual roles you've filled so people know that you're
Mhm.
successful. But I think if you have an equal balance of content, you follow, a program or a system, within 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, you do start to get people reach out to you. I think in this market, it's more challenging because it's more competitive for open jobs, right? There's a lot of agencies going after the same jobs. But I think even if you do it in this market, it will help your outbound and it will help you be that go-to person in your industry. And that's the goal. As a recruiter, I want to be the go-to person in whatever industry I'm serving. And I think there's a lot of room for creativity with this stuff because for the most part, people aren't that creative with content.
That's so smart because I like how you break it up. Because if you just did like funny videos, well, that's not so great because they'll say, "Hey, this guy Joel is really funny," but they're not going to reach out to you when they have a senior executive C-suite job. They're like, okay, so you might have something that's a little funny, but then you might have something serious. Then you might have something. Here's some people who I placed. So then overall, they realize, wait, this guy, he knows what he's doing and he's very creative. Yeah, let me reach out to him. And there's this really weird thing because I get this from writing and the podcast, and we had on LinkedIn Ben Mena, who has a podcast, and he's say similar to you. He doesn't necessarily do all the videos, but his podcast, people feel they know him. Same way
Exactly.
with you, you feel comfortable. They feel they know all about you. So then when it comes time, either they need your help because they're looking for a job, or you want to get a job from somebody. They feel like, sure, let's do it because you're a known entity now, as opposed to that just who is Jack, who's Joel. I don't really know them. I'm gonna take a pass. Thank you. No, thank you. So you create that immediate bond, which is wild, right? It's such a differentiator.
I think if you're small business,
Mhm.
you're solo, um, you have aspirations to be that in the future, or even if you're a smaller agency, let's say, 10 to 20 people, um, with social media being really the only cost is time, so if you're looking at 20 to 30 minutes a day, you're not paying for paid ads, you're not paying for newspaper, you're not paying for anything
Mhm.
else. I still rack my brain sometimes when people aren't doing it because it's again, outside of the cost of time, it's free to post on
Yeah.
these social networks. Um and I think it's that consistency piece, and I think it's also just enjoying it is a big piece. And I think luckily for me, I really enjoy content, but I always had in my mind a vision of where is this going to be a year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. I kind of had to go a long time because I didn't have any training. I didn't really have a system. Because of that, it took me a little bit longer. But now I see people that I work with that within 1, 2, 3 months, they're generating inbound leads. So that outbound is getting more successful because they're just following a program that makes sense, which is, that mix of content. And if you know what each type of content you're producing really is saying to the market, like open jobs is a great example. Like open jobs, everyone thinks, well, I'm posting an open job
Mhm.
so I can get candidates to reach out to me. And I'm like, well, yeah, but if you're also posting an open job, you're signaling to everybody in the market, hey, I'm working on these types of roles. So if you post an open software engineer job, and you have an engineering manager that you connected with 5 years ago, he goes, hey, I have that same software engineer role open, can you help me?
Mhm.
So instead of just always thinking like, think a little bit strategically, what am I saying to everybody in my network, right? Or if I talk about our team's growing, right, what are you signaling to the market? You're successful, your team's growing, great, people want to work with people who are seeing success, right? And so I think once you understand that, and then you understand that, you're trying to stay top of mind. Like you said, you just get known. Like Ben Mean Like I remember when he started the podcast, I was an early member on the guest. Now look at his podcast. He's getting thousands of downloads, but he's been doing it for 3 years. So not many people can do something for 3 years without seeing that. They want it right away. And I think with content, you got to be a little bit patient with
See,
it.
that's a great
The
point.
process.
That's such a great, because I'd imagine, and let's not say your clients, but just in general, you could see somebody who says, you know what, I see what he's doing. I could do the same thing. And maybe they do for 1 and 2. And after 4, they're like, I don't know what to say. I don't know what to do. I feel awkward. This is just cringe. I'm bailing out. And they give up. Whereas people like yourself and Ben and others who just say, you know what, screw it. I'm just going to keep plugging away, man. All right. If I don't get a lot of likes or interest, I'm not going to give up. I'm going to keep trying. And that's rough for people to do. I think it's really tough. I think most people, even recruiters who are used to rejection as a default thing, because we fail way more than we succeed in terms of doing it. But even then they feel like, you know what, I just don't want to do it. Is that what you see a lot with people, that they try and it just...
I see that, but I think it's funny because I always equate it to cold calling. And here's the difference between cold calling and content. Is cold calling, you can just hit that right. Like it's possible in your first, cold call hour that you get a hold of the ideal prospect and you close them. It's possible that can happen. But I think with content, like it's so much less likely that's going to happen. And so I think with cold calling, even though you get 95% rejection or 96, whatever that number is, it's like, like you're just one call away from like a job order, or, like them taking your MPC and you're winning a client. I think with content, you just don't get any of that gratification. So it is just pure like, oh my God, my post just flopped again. And I think most people, they do get to a point where they're like, all right, I'm putting in time here and I'm not getting anything out of it. But they're also not thinking of like their own behavior. And it's like, when's the last time you saw one post from somebody and you reached out to them to do business? Never happened. But if you see their content for 3 months, 6 months to a year, then you reach out to them. So I think you got to put yourself in how do you react when you're creating content, or sorry, when you're consuming content?
I got to go back because this is hilarious. I remember this so vividly. This has to go back 26 years ago, right? Where, think about it, no iPads, no real computer stuff. I mean, there's
fax machines. Come on,
dude. I would come in the morning. No joke. I come inside Monday morning. I'd race into the city, right? Race in. I lived in the city at the time. Raced in because if I didn't get there soon enough, the faxes will go off the machine, fall on the floor, and get all mixed up. And then I would have to spend the first hour of the day on Monday getting all like the resumes in line. And the first cold call, this is what brought me up. First cold call, guy at Citigrow, I still remember his name, Steve Keating, right? Called, and I get a job order. And I'm like, what do I do now? It's like the dog that caught the car. And I worked for a search firm at the time. And then I would go to like the more senior guy. I go, all right, what do I do now? And he's like, okay, here's what we do now. Here's what we do now. And then he kind of gave me, all right, here's what you say, here's what you do. And then, just from a cold call. And then I got to from there, Joel, I was hooked. I was like, wait, I can make, a 25% fee, and I'm placing people who are making $100,000, $200,000, $300,000. Like, wait a minute, God, and I was like, what's the catch? There got to be something. There got to be catch. And he realized it's not a catch. It's just you got the catch is you're going to get your ass kicked. You're going to have you're going to be humiliated at times. You're going to just feel like a biggest loser at times. You're going to be kicked in the balls all the time, and it just got to keep going through. And that's people
will just lie to you over and over, and you,
oh my God.
And then you're like, I just love people so much. Well, people are like, yeah, I really like people. I'm going to get into recruiting.
Right. I'm going to HR because I like people. I do recruit because I like people. No, I really like the money that comes with it. Let's be real. I'm going to be a real recruiter. Is that you want it? But it's so wild. Yeah, it's like, hey, Jack, it's now like Sunday night. Hey, I know I said I'm not going to take that that counter offer, but, and this is they gaslight you, but I got to do what's right for my family. So I'm going to take that job, even though I promised and they're waiting for me to show up on Monday. But you said you were going to take it. You promised, you signed the letter.
Well, my
But
last role with Hirewell,
yeah,
and before I got into working with James, the CRO over there, and just like working on
yeah.
I was like the only person in the kind of the sales, pure sales function. But before that, the first 9 months I was there, I was recruiting recruiters, and honestly, it burned me out because like I'm also like a heart in the sleeve type guy, and so like, and I naturally will trust people, but man, recruiting recruiters in
Uh,
2021,
is that
like
really
this
bad? Was that
wasn't
really tough?
oh man, it was just like, I think it was just tough because it was like you're dealing with people who know the same game that you're playing,
Yeah.
and so it was like stuff just doesn't work in the same way. Like it's very hard to close like an agency
Yeah.
recruiter. But then I don't know. It's like it's like again, like I will trust. I really trust people and all this type of stuff. And like again, I think I just that to me and that market was enough for me to go. You know what? Like I just need to take a break. And with that, how the market was, I was like, you know what? It makes sense at this point when I have a ton of, not having a ton of business,
Yeah.
and now maybe I need to just transition into training and coaching and development and helping other recruiters who I think, in the future, I was talking to Danny Cahill yesterday on the live show, and he's just like, like one of the future of like agency recruiting is recruiters that they understand digital, they understand how to leverage technology, they understand how to leverage the human side and building relationships. And so I that is a thought with content. Like I don't think you can just go all in on content and that's it. You still got to be really good at sales. You still
Mm.
got to be really good at developing relationships. You got to be able to go out and meet people. You got to go to trade shows. It's multifaceted now. And I think maybe in 2020 it did shift to like mostly digital because there wasn't any face-to-face,
Mm.
interactions. But now the recruiters of the future, it's like you've got to embrace every tool that you can possibly have, and understand how each one works and and understand how you can grow a business using all of them. Right? It's and pick and choose the ones you're good at, because it's like for me, I'm not cold caller. I don't enjoy being cold, and so I'm not going to do it. And so now I have to work harder on building a more visible brand and getting that visibility. But I do cold outreach. I do DMs and emails all the time. It's just most of the time people are like, "Oh yeah, I'll take the call because I know, I've seen something of you. I think you're funny or whatever." Um, but I think there's recruiters coming in. I think you have to be aware of how to do this digital stuff, and how this tech's going to work and how you can scale yourself. But you can't lose that just pure human to human sales and persuasion and relationships, right?
Yeah. I see. I started when you could only cold call and make calls. So I'm used to it, and I'm going to date myself. I'd have the rotary phone at home where you'd have to go, I
Yeah.
don't know. I know you're younger than me, so you probably didn't have that. And I was used to picking up the phone, having to say, "Hey, Mrs. Smith, can I speak to Joel? Is he there?" And then she would say, and then you'd have to be engaged with Joel's mom and have a conversation. So you do this day in, day out. And that gave great training then when you became a recruiter, because you're used to
Yeah.
having the mom or dad asking a billion questions. How are you doing? How are you doing in school? How's your brother doing? How are your parents doing? What's going on? So it forced you to do that. So then when it came to recruiting, I loved doing it. I loved cold calling people. It was awesome. And I would find out more often than not, they'd be receptive. Every once in a while you get someone and then who'd be angry, but then they call me back later and say, "Hey, Jack, my boss is standing over my shoulder. I didn't mean to be a jerk. I didn't mean to blow you off. I didn't want to blow up my spot."
Yeah. Look, and I think, I was talking to someone a while back too, and they're like, you'd have to map out organizations, right? Like leverage that gatekeeper for information on like who the engineers were, who
Yes.
was in the office. And now obviously you
Yeah.
can, you can just go map
Yeah.
out an organization
Yeah.
on LinkedIn. Uh, but it doesn't take away, it's like regardless, because I think people like with cold calling or cold emailing or whatever
Mm.
it is, it's however you get past that cold to warm, right? Because
Yeah.
once you've just talked to someone, then you have that warm relationship, then you can follow up. But then after that, the skills are all the same. Like you've got to be really good with follow up. You've got to be persuasive. You've got to be likable. And then at the end of the day, as a recruiter, like you've got to be able to execute and fill roles. And if you're not doing that, um, you're not going to get more business from people. So regardless how big your brand, I tell people all the time, like regardless of how big your brand is online, you still got to be good at sales.
Mhm.
You still got to be good at having conversations, building relationships, providing value. And if people don't see you as valuable or they don't see you as somebody that can help them, doesn't matter how many followers you got, you're not going to close the business.
How about, Joel, on the flip side, do you have advice for job seekers? Can
Yeah.
they kind of do the same things that you are suggesting? You know, you're giving advice to the recruiters, how they could stand out, how they could be creative, do videos. Because what I'm seeing is for particular white collar, mid to senior level folks, it is brutal. It is really rough. I mean, in my opinion, right now, with what's going on in the Middle East, what's happening in Ukraine, with high inflation, with the worry about recession, and just add on to it, companies are freaked out and they really don't want to hire if they don't have to. So job seekers, like we've seen, sending out 500 resumes, not getting anything, going on interview after interview, nothing happening. Are there things that maybe for the people who are the job seekers, and I know this is kind of more recruiting centric, this, what we're talking about now, but to switch it
Yeah.
a little bit,
Yeah.
can they put together kind of your game plan, but tweak it a little bit so they could stand out?
Yeah. I look at LinkedIn for most white collar professionals, right? LinkedIn
Yeah.
is still the place that you're connecting with colleagues and, maybe if you're in sales, it's prospects and people you're trying to reach out to. So I think a lot of the similar things apply. Do I think that creating content is going to land you a job, overnight? No, just like it's not going to land a recruiter, a sale, or a candidate overnight.
Mhm.
I think when I'm working with job seekers, the number one thing that you need to be focusing on is your resume as good as it can be. And look, to me, if you're applying to 500 places and not hearing anything back,
Yeah.
there's something wrong with your resume. And
There's
I think
something going on, right? There's an issue.
and you need to be quick to make adjustments and you cannot take things
Yeah.
personally. Okay. So, number one is job seekers right now. There's a lot
Yeah.
of actual AI tools. So we're talking about AI tools for recruiters. There are a lot of AI tools for job seekers available. I think of like Teal's one, for example, that become really popular. I think they're doing a good job with like influencer marketing and things like that. But they've got like AI tools that can help you craft a resume, that can help you match your resume to job descriptions. I've been working with a company recently that has an auto apply tool, which literally takes your resume and it applies you to jobs that it thinks you're a fit for. So I'm not saying those two solutions are, I'm not like
Yeah.
promoting them and saying you need to sign up for them, but you need to realize like there are these AI tools that can help you with these things. But I think if you're on the job market right now, if your resume isn't getting you any results, change it up quick. Same with your LinkedIn profile. LinkedIn profile isn't getting hits from recruiters, change it up. Make sure your resume and your LinkedIn match so you have the basics. And I think it is today, it's a multifaceted approach. I think if all you're doing is applying to jobs, it's not enough. I think you've got to be reaching out to your network. And I think people get freaked out with network. Like, what is
Mhm.
that? What does network mean? Okay, this is what a network is. Friends and family are still part of your network. Like it's people people that can vouch for your character, people that can say, Joel does great work. He's a great person. You should interview him. Those are people that you need to be reaching out to. And again, when you reach out to people nowadays, even if it's your mom, okay, you can't just reach out once. Okay. If people don't respond, you got to reach out to them a couple times because we're all bombarded with messages. So it's applying, it's networking, and then it's also realizing like there's communities out there. So if you're in marketing, I can name 3 online marketing communities off the top of my head for people that I know who run them.
Mhm.
Join those online communities. Go to the in-person events. So just like how I was saying with recruiters, you got to be multi-pronged with your approach. You can't just be digital. It's got to be digital, phone, email, meeting face to face. It's a similar approach to job seeking nowadays. You've got to be meeting new people, networking with industry people, reaching out to people you've worked with, people that you're, again, friends and family, um, as well as applying. So I think the job search today, it is hard, but I think if all you're doing is just applying the jobs online, I don't think you're doing enough. I think you've got to leverage every relationship that you could possibly leverage. And then also keep in your mind, you could do everything right nowadays. You can nail the interview and still not get the job. So you have to just keep that perspective in mind, that it's just hard work right now. And I think the worst thing that you can do is start to get down on yourself and go,
Yeah.
well, it's never going to happen for me. You've got to somehow keep that positive mindset and go, I'm going to keep doing this. I'm going to keep doing the right things. So maybe it's listening to like a sales motivation tape, because it's really like right now sales for job seeking. I feel like it's very similar. You get your prospects, who you're reaching out to, and all these different ways to reach out to people. And then the last thing I'll say too is I think when you're looking on social media and you're trying to find people to listen to with a job search, you need to understand that every single piece of advice out there is just opinion. There's no one solution that works for every single person, because companies don't have the same hiring process across the board. Each company does it differently. So when you're listening to advice from people, try out different advice. And if it works for you, great, double down on it. But if something doesn't work for you, it doesn't mean that person was lying or they were trying to like mislead you. It just means it was their opinion and they've seen it work before. But you've got to take everything with a grain of salt. And the worst thing you can do is just believe that when people say, "I'll guarantee you this will get you a job," be careful of things like that, because in my experience, there's nothing guaranteed. You can get an offer and think you're going to start a job and get it rescinded, and there's just no guarantees in hiring and recruitment, at least from my experience. So just be careful who you listen to and who you let into that space.
I think that's great advice. I think that's really super helpful. I like, in particular, when you're talking about the sales part, because I think for a lot of job seekers, they're not thinking in those terms. For recruiters, we're always thinking sales, persuasion, closing the deal. But that's kind of what you have to do when you're interviewing. You have to sell yourself. And I think a lot of times when people interview, they feel like icky if they're selling themselves, like they're doing something wrong. They're being a self-promoter. But yeah, you have to sell it, and you got to close the deal. You got to get the person to like you, want to hire you. And what do you think about this? Like, as you were talking about the different, the way recruiters, to have, kind of video with LinkedIn, you have that open to work banner, which is whatever, some people say not good. Some people say it's great, whatever. But what in addition to that, you have, let's say I'm a job seeker and I take a page out of your playbook and say, all right, maybe I'll do, a LinkedIn video that I'm going to upload on LinkedIn and say, hey, I'm, working, for ABC company. This is what I do, this is what I do, and I lost, I was laid off in a reorg, and here's what I want to do next. But you said, really good quality, and then you try to not be woe is me, but come across really, positive, really upbeat, really motivated. The production value is good, really tight, maybe 30 seconds, 40 seconds. Do you think that's viable? Do you think people could do that? Or it's just too uncomfortable for most folks?
Look, I think for some people that can work really, really
Yeah.
well. And I would say, personal branding in general for professionals, no matter what field you're in, whether you're in recruitment, sales, marketing, engineering, having a personal brand will help you in your career without a doubt. And having a personal brand on LinkedIn, creating valuable content for your field will help. And so I think I'm just trying to put myself in the seat of like a job seeker and what would be valuable content for people. I think talking about technology that's going to impact your industry, talking about different ways to do things, or different ways of thinking. So for example, in engineering, maybe it's something around like engineering mindset and like how you solve problems or problem solving, or how you approach different problems. I think that type of content can just be valuable to your network, and it can help create some awareness of who you are, and it can open up opportunities. But again, it doesn't mean then if you do that, then you stop applying to places, right? So I think creating awareness and adding value for your brand overall is going to help you in your career. Uh, Again, like I look at internal recruiters and I talk to them all the time about this. If you want,
Mhm.
when you create content, it's not just for candidates, it's for your hiring managers as well. If your hiring managers are seeing you on a regular basis, you're going to create trust with them. So when you go to submit candidates, they're going to trust you more, right? Your leadership at your company is going to see you. And the same would apply to any candidate. Like if you are somebody who's creating content and adding value, you're going to be seen by leadership in your company, and you're going to create trust, subject matter expertise. You're going to create a brand that's valuable to them. So I'm a huge proponent of anybody doing that. And then, if you decide one day you want to go into consulting in your space, obviously having some sort of digital presence or following around whatever you're looking to do is big. There's a guy from Airbnb, Zach. What's his last name? Can't even think of his last name, but he worked for Airbnb, grew his LinkedIn following to 300 plus thousand followers. He's now big on Instagram and Twitter and all this sort of stuff. And now he's set up basically a boot camp for people to get in data analytics. Um, and he's created a huge business. I mean,
Mhm.
massive business, getting more than he was making more doing this now than he did at Airbnb. But he started by just talking about data analytics and the tools and putting out value for years. So those things are certainly viable. I think Lou Adler a long time ago when I had him on my live show, he said, one of the things you could do as a job seeker is, put together like a project on something and like demonstrate that you can add value to the company, and reach out to them and say, hey, I've got this marketing idea, I've got this idea. And I think with that, you've got to be careful how much time you invest into these things. It's free work. But that's why content's great, because you can just talk about these things and scale it out to your network, right? And on LinkedIn, again, you're connected to people and so you never know. You put out something, suddenly you become top of mind, and they go, actually, yeah, we need to hire someone like you. It's not beyond the realm of possibility that someone could reach out to you and say, hey, we got this opportunity. We'd love for you to be considered for it.
I love it. I love this was like a masterclass in what to do, what's going on with recruiters, how recruiters could get noticed, how to help out job seekers. So this is super helpful. I really appreciate you taking the time. And before we wrap up,
Yeah.
I know you said you're looking to go back into recruiter. What's next for you? What's the next plan and how can people reach you?
Yeah. So like we kind of discussed earlier,
Yeah.
I started a business in March where basically helping corporate teams
Hmm.
develop a strategy for social media. And a lot of times it just ends up being LinkedIn, although I've
Hmm.
given some like TikTok masterclasses. I
Right.
gave a Facebook masterclass. But the idea is like inspiring the recruiting team to use social media and get the brand out there. And what I found with that business is it's a fun business. I enjoy training and coaching. But really, I'm only really looking to take on 2 to 3 of those clients a month, because it takes a lot of
Mm.
energy and a lot more energy anticipated. So, and that side of the business is running pretty smoothly. Also do like influencer partnerships with HR and TA tech. So like some of these AI companies that are looking to reach recruiters, I'll work with them and I'll put out content. So that type of business, again, I'm not going to work with 9 brands at a time. I work with like 1 to 2. So it's not really like a business. It's some side income.
Yeah.
And so I got to a point where I was like, you know what? I actually want to I want to use some of these tools in recruitment, because I think there's so many amazing tools that can help you, especially as like a solo recruiter. And so I think this next phase for me, it's 3 things. It's building up my podcast and newsletter. That's something that's going to be more focused, and then taking on 1, 2, 3 recruitment clients, probably on a retainer or like a monthly retainer type basis, and getting back into the hands-on recruitment, because I do still see, although it is a tough market,
Mhm.
there are still people that need help filling roles, obviously. So that's my plan for 2024, and definitely going to be more of like lifestyle type business, because I've got 3 young kids and I really value the time with them. But could scale into something bigger, and then yeah, I'm really kind of open to different things for the future.
This is amazing. I really appreciate you taking the time and love the advice. Fantastic. I think you're helping both recruiters, job seekers, and during a time where they need it. So I really greatly appreciate you coming on the show and adding all this value. So thanks a lot, man.
Yeah, and
Awesome.
look, I've been a huge follower of yours too, Jack, for a long time. So I'm really honored that you asked me to be on the show. I
Well,
think we were going to do this about maybe a year ago, and it just what I don't know what happened, but appreciate you just
it all
being
worked
being
out.
able to
This
put
is
out.
awesome.
It all worked out, and I love the
Thanks.
value that you give to everybody. So
Well, thank you. I appreciate it,
keep it
man.
up.
Thanks.
Appreciate it.
Take care. Bye
See
bye.
you guys.